everyone. Welcome back to What Magic Is This? A podcast about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. My name is Douglas Batchelor. Now, I had started to think of a couple of ways in which to start this program, and I came down to about two options. The first option was, Doug, just be professional. Just be professional, introduce the guest, the topic, and just start talking. And then I thought of another way, which is perhaps a little less professional, but perhaps even more relatable to you, the listener. So I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to apologize immediately to my guest, but I'm going to say, I love Indiana Jones. If Indiana Jones didn't exist, I don't think that there'd be a podcast. It was such an enormous influence on me growing up. I loved everything about him. But one of the things that I was most enamored with Indiana Jones, it wasn't the bullwhip, it wasn't the fedora, it was the magical artifacts that he would have in his hands and he'd look at. And I would get reproductions of these idols and certain things. There's something about magical artifacts and things that have been imbued with magic somehow. And later on in life, I had the wonderful opportunity to work at a museum. It belongs in a museum. I had a chance to work in a museum, and I was able to hold some of these magical artifacts in my hand. And it is a very strange thing. And I know that each and every one of you listening, if you are a practitioner, you have something perhaps that you could consider a magical artifact in some way, shape, or form. And so I just really wanted to talk at some point on my podcast about magical items. And today I have the absolute perfect guest, somebody whose work I've been following for the last year and a half here, and it's been really quite incredible. And I really wanted to have them on the show. So my guest is an archaeologist with a research focus in ancient magic and ritual practice. Her work specializes on the ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Roman record, and both the archaeological and the textual sources. They share many amazing ancient magic insights over at their must-visit website, Antique Magi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The archaeology of ancient magic and ritual practice, as well as the YouTube channel of the same name. Welcome to What Magic Is This podcast, Dr. Kirsten Dzwiza.
Thank you, Douglas. Thank you for your invitation. And I'm very happy to be on your podcast. And yeah.
Indiana Jones, was it an influence? I have to ask. I know I didn't put this question. I give my guests a list of questions, and I have to throw this in there. Was Indiana Jones? You are an archaeologist of magic. Like, that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, didn't expect that. It turns out like that, but yeah, it's really cool. And no, it's actually not that I was inspired by Indiana Jones. I loved the movies too, and I loved the Lara Croft movies and video games. And of course, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I did LARP. So I loved thinking about and discussing what kinds of magic were there, and like astral magic, divine magic, natural magic, magic from within yourself, and how you might be able to channel magic into like something like artifacts, like something you can hold in your hands. So, but I never knew that you could actually study that.
Cool.
And it was until I finished my studies that I came across ancient magic, or at the very end, I came across ancient magic, curse tablets and magic signs, actually. So that was in the early 2000s when I started to look into this, and somehow I got stuck there.
Amazing. So I want people to, before we get into the questions here, I want people to realize we can't talk about all magical artifacts from all over the world. We're going to be talking mainly about, Egyptian, Roman, Greek for the most part. And we're going to maybe cap it at about the 6th, 7th century AD. We can't talk about it all. So we're going to talk about most of the stuff which is in Dr. Dzwiza's purview, so for the most part. And so don't worry, this is the good stuff. Everybody loves magic in Egypt and Greece. And so that's basically what we're going to be concentrating on for the most part. So I kind of asked you a little bit about this, but have you always been interested in magic? How did magic just kind of come into your life at some point? Or like, why did this come about? How is it that you were an archaeologist whose focus is ancient magic?
Well, it was really like I was finishing my studies in Mainz, in the German town of Mainz, which was a huge military camp and a main city of a Roman province. And that was at the time when the temple of Isis and Magna Mater was found in the center of Mainz and excavated, and there were curse tablets there as well. So basically, this was all when it started that I became aware of, oh wow, there is ancient magic, and it actually did exist, and about this magic science. So and I think it's my fascination with magical artifacts has to do with I think our imagination. So I'm totally fascinated by our imagination, not only intelligence. I think imagination is an equal talent or competence we have, and I think our imagination is one of the most powerful tools we have at our hand to perceive, understand, and shape our world, non-physical, incorporeal, and physical world. And a magical artifact is a product of channeling and shaping powers into something you can hold at hand and carry around based on the application of this, our imagination. So I don't mean fantasy and making up things. I really mean imagination as a means to perceive our environment. And I find this combination, or I find this very fascinating. I think our imagination is one of the most underestimated and undertrained and under-researched powers in opposite to intelligence. And thinking about magical artifacts and studying the various kinds of ancient magic, to me, is in a way an option to explore human imagination in more depth. You know, you need imagination to try to make, especially like the divine realm and the powers magic is dealing and working with, to make it perceivable or understandable. You know, you need this imagination, I think. So that's why I was so fascinated, because I suddenly had, with ancient magic and magical artifacts, I suddenly had, in opposite to Dungeons and Dragons and LARP, I suddenly had something real at hand, you know, real people in the past who believed in this, who thought about this, who spent their time with this, and who practiced magic. So I wanted to know more about it.
Amazing. You're speaking my language here about imagination, about imagination being such an underutilized aspect of life today. And it's one of those things that my podcast exists to try and get people to lead into their imagination. Kirsten, I have to ask you, because everybody needs to know. You're the very first archaeologist I've had on the show, but what does an archaeologist of ancient magic get up to? Are you in there? Do you go to I see somebody with, a handkerchief over their head in a dust storm, and you're digging something, but I know a lot of times these conceptions are fantasy, but what does an archaeologist of ancient magic do?
Well, ideally working with the ancient primary sources, and that is magical artifacts from the archaeological record, and ritual manuals, which is like ancient grimoires and other literary sources, and trying to make sense out of them. So it's not that I'm in the dust or in the sandstorm and, digging excavating some grave or something like that. It's rather that I work with the finds we have.
Okay.
Because most of the ancient primary sources we have were excavated during the 19th and 20th century. So we do have a lot of sources that have been published like 100 years ago or decades ago and then left. And a lot of new sources come up almost on a daily basis, because lots of artifacts in museums are stored in museums, and there's just not the people, the resources to work with them, to publish them. So there's a lot of artifacts that are still unpublished. And so that's basically what an archaeologist of ancient magic ideally does, working with the ancient sources and thinking about what they mean, and then hopefully making them, publish them and making them available to a broader audience, so that more people can put their brains on it.
Amazing. That's just as cool. I have to say, like as much fun as, going out there with a a bullwhip. I'm sorry I keep talking about Indiana Jones, but it's just
No,
like
it's great.
the idea. I've heard other archaeologists say that Indiana Jones is the worst archaeologist who has ever existed. I probably agree with that. But man, it's just one of those things where when I think of archaeologists, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Indiana Jones. But that is very cool.
It's really cool because it's like, you know, the fascinating thing about it's adventure, and you can be right in the middle of it. And the thing is, like, that's exactly what research is like. Probably every research should be like that. But for example, I've spent the last month with research into a list of encoded secret ritual ingredients, which is preserved in a Greco-Egyptian magical scroll. It's dated to the 4th century, and it's from Egypt. And it's pretty awesome that things like this actually exist in real. So we do have a magical papyrus with a lot of ritual instructions, and right in the middle of these instructions, out of nowhere, is a list with 37 encrypted ingredients. And so there's an accompanying text to the list, and that says that the code words were used by Egyptian priests to prevent non-experts from applying the ritual ingredients incorrectly and thus causing harm. But there's no information given about like how or for what purposes the ingredients were actually used. So I wanted to know if it's possible to find out more about these really weird code words, because they're like blood of Ares and semen of Helios or bone of an ibis. And these are code words for mostly plant-based ingredients. And I want to know if it's possible to find out what the encoded ritual ingredients were and what they were used for. And it is. And that's the cool thing. And it really feels like Indiana Jones in a way.
That's so cool.
You've got this, like, you think, oh my God, this is like a cool riddle. You could have this in a lab, or you could have this in Dungeons and Dragons,
right.
Yeah, but it's real.
That's
and
right.
You can look into it and you can actually get answers. So and another thing an archaeologist of ancient magic does, and I'm working on, is like I focused on reconstructing the rituals given in the magical papyri, like the divination rituals in the 8th book of Moses and in the Helios Mithras mystery. And it's really interesting when you try to reconstruct them. So you don't just read them, but you try to put them in a chronological order. You make a list of what ritual ingredients you need. And there's so much information very often that's encrypted, or that's missing, or that's like more not cryptography, but steganography. So it's like it's hidden. It's not really like encrypted, but it's rather hidden, or it's given in pictures, in iconography. And this is all real, you know. My brain is dancing all the time when things like this are there. So, and the cool thing is that some of the things, like the 8th book of Moses, they're so heavily encrypted, and the author who wrote it was really good in encryption, and he was very focused on this. So some of the text you have to recite, he wrote down in a different book that is not preserved. So we can't really reconstruct one-on-one this divination ritual. But the Helios Mithras mystery, which is like the Mithras liturgy is the common term. This is actually, I was totally surprised, because you always read like it's so mysterious and it's so difficult to understand. In terms of reconstructing the ritual, it's the most clear instructions.
It's all there. It's
all there, every word, and it's the description, the imagination. You know, it's describe what you see and what you experience. This is so fascinating. This is so amazing. Yeah,
I love it.
And there's it really, you just have to open a translation, like the best translation of the magical papyri, or you just basically, you can just Google, like Google Scholar or something, like for ancient magic or something. You just need to read 1 or 2 quotes from an ancient papyrus or an inscription from an artifact, or think about the Pergamon tools, like the tools of a magician. And it's like, okay, done. Sorry, guys, I don't have time for the next 3 months. I'm busy.
Going on my own adventure, my own magical adventure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really cool.
I love it. Fantastic. So before I had Kirsten on the show, I gave her a list of about 8 things that perhaps we could talk about. And they sent me an email back immediately being like, we have to talk about magical artifacts. There's nothing like everything else kind of interesting. We could talk about magic in ancient Rome, but artifacts is what I want to talk about. And I was like, amazing. That's what I want to talk about too. So what to you, Kirsten, constitutes a magical artifact?
Okay, so in Greco-Roman magic and in the Greco-Egyptian magical papyri, magical artifacts are fate changers. So if you have an artifact that was created with the intention to actually impact or modify fate, your own or that of others, there's a good chance that is a magical artifact. Because one of the fundamental ideas underlying ancient magic is the existence of fate, or the belief in the existence of fate, but a fate that can be impacted and changed. So not one that's written in stone. But it cannot be impacted and changed directly by a human, but by a higher power invoked and directed by a human. This is one of the core criteria in the magical papyri, that you see you always need to invoke a higher power. Often you need to invoke a higher power and direct them to that this higher power invokes another higher power. So, higher powers as intermediates. But basically, an ancient magical artifact in Greco-Egyptian and Greco-Roman magic is an artifact that has the power to change fate. And one of the major challenges with ancient potentially magical artifacts is to determine if they were made to impact and change fate, or if they were made to communicate to a higher power the plea, or wish for impacting fate. So this is a bit like what in scholarship you read: is it religion, or is it magic? Is it a prayer, or is it a direction? That
Petition,
say
even
you have to do this.
a petition as well, like petition.
Yes. For example. But I think the question is not, it's very difficult to say from our point of view, because today we're all outsiders. There's an initiate in ancient magic. We have to reconstruct our knowledge, or the knowledge about ancient magic. So it's difficult to say what is magic, what is religion. I don't think that that's possible at all. But what we can clearly say is that all the artifacts and the rituals described in the magical papyri we have, and a lot of the artifacts we have from the archaeological record, they were made to change fate, to impact your everyday life. Ancient magic actually was a very important means to help dealing with common existential challenges, like protection from dangers or opponents, from healing diseases and other medical contexts, like exorcisms, for being successful at work, being respected, and also being loved. I'm going a bit far here, right?
It's okay. That really does tie into the question that I was going to ask to follow this one up. Is that it seems that the same thing that people would do, magical practitioners these days would create charms, whatever we want to call it. There's so many names these days, are pretty much the same thing that people were doing back then to help with illnesses, for love, for money, like that. So do you see that this is, for the most part, what the record shows is that the same concerns we have now are the concerns that people back then had?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really what impacts people every day. On an everyday basis, and it's people from all walks of life. But the existential challenges are the same: stay healthy, stay happy, find someone to love or have happy sex,
Nice.
Being successful at work. Yeah, it's important. But it's all these. It concerns all of us, no matter if you're rich or poor, or if you're happy or not. It's more or less the same things. You want to be successful, you want to be appreciated, all these things. But the really cool thing is with the ancient magical artifacts is that our knowledge about them reaches far beyond the archaeological record, thanks to the preserved Egyptian and Greek ritual manuals we talked about. Because most of so in terms of the archaeological record, we're talking about like roughly 8,000 magical artifacts that are preserved from the period of about 200, now let's say 500 or 5th century BCE to the 6th, 7th century CE. So this is the period where we have actually artifacts and ritual manuals from Egypt, where our knowledge about Greek, Roman, and Egyptian magic is from. So that's about roughly 8,000 magical artifacts from the archaeological record. But most of these artifacts were not excavated. They were purchased over the antiquities trade, dealers in antiquities. So we don't know anything about like where did they come from. And even if they would be excavated, like when you find artifacts in a temple context, you don't know nothing about the ritual context. But the manuals, the Egyptian and Greek ritual manuals, they grant us all these information. They tell us exactly how an artifact was prepared, when it was used, how it was used. And there are around 300 inscribed magical artifacts described in these manuals. And so we know about the ritual acts and the ritual performances in which they were embedded, and we know how they were applied. Sorry. And we know, thanks to the ritual manuals, that there were artifacts that were really embedded in a larger ritual. Like you had a divination ritual, and then very often, like most of the protective artifacts, the amulets in the magical papyri, are actually for the practitioner to be used during the ritual.
Right.
So we wouldn't know that if we find amulets in the archaeological record. The first idea is always, someone wore this for protection. Yeah, but a lot of these amulets seem to be worn by the practitioner during the ritual, so not in public. And many of these artifacts seem to be that you can use them only once, because many of the artifacts in the manuals are organic. You wouldn't find them in the archaeological record.
Right.
This is so really cool, and we learn a lot more about the purposes. Yet, because we have like organic materials like eggs, like laurel roots, leaves, even bones, but we also have the purposes, and we learn that there were artifacts to destroy pharmaca, to destroy spells, to separate couples, to bring couples together. That's what we have from the archaeological record as well. But also to ban anger, to cause sleeplessness, or even to cause sleep, to make a woman speak at night. Things like this we don't have in the archaeological. To send dreams, to receive dreams, to desiccate a well, and even to prolong the life of a prematurely deceased person, to ensoul a statuette, and to improve memory, and so forth, so forth. So there's so much more information about why about the purpose for magical artifacts. We don't know from the archaeological record, and especially this to ensoul a statuette, the procedure, how to do this, and the underlying ideas there. So the magical papyri, the ritual manuals, are an incredible source to learn more about for what purposes were magical artifacts used.
Yeah, I want to hone in on something you said there, because this kind of goes against what a lot of people these days would do with charms and amulets and things of that variety. Is that you said that a lot of times the records, things like the PGM, is that these sometimes were just used once and then they were disposed of. Like, we have this feeling now, because we all have hung around like new age shops of people always wearing crystals and always wearing things. And I can't go to this place unless I wear this thing all the time. But what we see, and which is very interesting, that so people would only use these things sometimes, only use these things once. But is there evidence that some people would utilize them and they'd have to wear these things all the time, or like do we see a wide variety of how some of these artifacts were utilized?
It's very interesting because sometimes it's that information that is consistently missing tells you a lot about, like, what or helps you answer a question, even though the information is missing. So in the vast majority of the artifacts that are described in the magic papyri, we don't have information about that.
No.
And I think there's only one artifact that where the instruction explicitly says this artifact you can wear all your life.
Oh, wow.
So, and because this is said in this, just in one case, it's preserved that this is said about an artifact, makes you wonder if, it seems to be not normal, or it seems not normal that artifacts were used that long. Of course, if you think like, okay, if you make an artifact out of gold, you can probably reuse it, would make sense. But you also have in the magic papyri quite often alternative materials. So you can make, you can make an artifact out of papyrus, out of gold, or out of another material. And you see that it's like, okay, this is if you don't have so much money, this is if you have more money. And the question is, okay, if you use a papyrus artifact multiple times, and a problem they had, and this is documented in the papyri as well, is that, it was pretty warm in Egypt. And if you inscribe a papyrus and you wear it on your skin, the ink, how do you say it? The ink melts.
Yeah, it'll blend it. It'll deform.
It'll get blurry. So, and this was an absolute no-go because the power was in the writing. So we do have instructions in which it is explicitly said that make sure that you don't sweat, or make sure that, then you have to fold it one more time, or you have to do, you have to take care that the inscription won't be compromised by your sweat or by anything like that. So a papyrus artifact wouldn't last that long.
No.
For example, compared to gold. We have other artifacts where that are destroyed during the ritual. So it is sure that, or it is clear that you have to recreate them with every ritual. And it doesn't, that there's different ways of destruction. You can burn them, you can bury them or deposit them somewhere, you can throw them in the water. One very specific way of a semi-destruction is, and this is so fascinating, is like you inscribe, like for example, it's a Coptic spell. You inscribe an alabaster tablet, honey, and then you put a mixture of wine and water over it, and you drink this.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you drink, that you incorporate the inscription. You do this in the 8th book of Moses, for example. You have a natron tablet which you inscribe, and then you pour water and wine over it and incorporate this as well. And this is often to establish a direct connection to a higher power. Cool. Because the idea is that the word, and that's very Egyptian, the written word is, especially in hieroglyphs, but later in Greek as well, the magic is in the writing. And so by incorporating, by embodying the writing, you embody the magic, the divine magic. But this, of course, means that the alabaster tablet or the artifact, you can do this with this natron tablet or gold lamella, for example, as well. It doesn't mean exactly that this artifact is destroyed, but still you have to recreate the inscription.
Right.
Again.
Yeah, it's so unbelievably fascinating. And you did mention, which answers one of the questions that I put down, is just a lot of this stuff. If we didn't have these scrolls, what is composed within this book that people can go out and buy by Hans Dieter Betz, called the Greek Magical Papyri in translation. If we didn't have these things, a lot of the knowledge that we have about how we found these a lot of the knowledge of what we think these artifacts were, we would not have any information. So you would say that the Greek magical papyri is fundamental to our understanding of these artifacts, yeah?
So I think it's important to first mention maybe again that the PGM and the PDM comprise manuals as well as artifacts from applied ritual practice.
Okay.
And the manuals constitute the most important source for our knowledge about and understanding of ancient Greco-Egyptian magic and the magical artifacts, because they comprise all the details, the texts for invocations, the praises and the prayers, the artifacts, the things like the burnt offerings, the incensing, information about preparations, and especially about the time when a ritual can be performed. So information about like good days or bad days, or specific star constellations. And they offer a lot of background information about the underlying beliefs, concepts, mythologies, all the deities, all the secret names in there. So, and since all of the preserved magic papyri and the ritual menus are actually from Egypt, they provide the most comprehensive and detailed information about Greco-Egyptian magical artifacts as well, concerning those found in Egypt, but also those found elsewhere, because you find not papyrus, but artifacts like the gems, like gold, silver, bronze, copper lamellae, like the cursed tablets,
Of them.
and others. You find them all over the Roman Empire.
Yeah. So fascinating. Yeah. And that's something I mentioned in a Greek episode that I did an episode on Greek magic is defectiones, that these tablets in which curses were put and they were dropped in wells, and we keep finding them. We're still finding them these days. It's so unbelievably fascinating. What's interesting for people, and particularly in this day and age when we're constantly told that, everything's got to be separated. Like the Greek pantheon is the Greek pantheon, but the Roman pantheon kind of like took stuff from the Greek pantheon. But then there's the Egyptian pantheon of gods and things of that variety, and they're all separate. But when we take a look at things like the PGM and even some of these artifacts, you will see on one side the three kings from the story of the birth of Jesus Christ on one side. And then on the other side of the artifact, you'll see Osiris, which is this incredible, it's just so interesting and weird. But what's so strange about these artifacts that sometimes the gods or entities depicted on them are from different religions, different traditions, and pantheons. So what does this tell us about ancient magic?
Well, it tells us that there was not a single way to achieve a goal. That performing ancient magic was not written in stone, but practitioners experimented with rituals, and they could be highly creative. There was not a single belief or religious system which constituted the fundament of ancient magic. There were many. Egypt at the time of Greco-Egyptian and Roman magic was actually a melting pot of all kinds of things, of cultures, knowledge, religions, mythologies, and so much, like knowledge about medicine, alchemy. This is reflected in ancient magic. Practitioners combined different beliefs, different schools of thought, different ritual practices, and they made them into something new. Most of the preserved rituals involve more than one higher power, and it's the same with most of the inscriptions on magical artifacts. And a lot of the ritual manuals, the rituals written down there, they have annotations and comments. And we have, like in the London Leiden Magical Papyrus, we have several similar rituals written after each other. And then it says, at the end, it says, well, this one works better than the previous one. Or we have, like in the Egyptian ritual manuals, we often find things like, this one has been tested 9 times and it works very well. So we have comments upon this, but we also have things like, you have a little note on the side, and then like a tiny star or something, and then you have at the bottom, you have, for example, an additional sentence in an for the invocation, or there is an invocation with the list of secret names, and then it says in another papyrus or in another book, I read, or it was written, and then you have an alternative name.
Right.
So it really wasn't written in stone. It was a living art and science that was practiced, and people had the chance and took the chance to explore, to apply their imagination, to apply their brain. Imagine if you look at the magical papyri, imagine how much knowledge the practitioners must have had.
Yeah.
They embedded astrological knowledge, astronomical knowledge, medical knowledge. They embedded so much knowledge about gods, higher powers, and not so higher powers, and so many different concepts. And if you think that these were people who believed in what they did, and yeah, there were probably also frauds or tricksters and people who exploited this, but I think there were a lot of people who really believed in what they did, and they wouldn't have played around with names of higher powers, with gods or anything. So this ancient magic was a chance to apply your knowledge, to explore new dimensions, different belief systems, different religions, and explore them, but in a very respectful way. And that's what we see. So we see this syncretism. We see this intercultural, interreligious exchange, not only in Egypt, all over the Roman Empire. And it basically offered an ocean of gods, beliefs, and ideas to draw from.
It's so fascinating. I absolutely love it. I think that's one of the reasons that, at least I can speak for myself, that I'm so fascinated with this period of time. The Hellenized Egypt, and then the later Roman Egypt. It's so unbelievably incredible. And you use the word syncretic, and that is truly what it is. It was not just done because they were trying to pay lip service. It was pragmatic in the fact that if somebody's magic worked, you could have Egyptian gods next to the Jewish god next, and it was unbelievable. And Dr. Dzwiza has this wonderful video about this specific artifact. I believe it's called Solomon's Seal Has Annihilated You.
Yes.
Please, people, if you're unfamiliar with Dr. Dzwiza's work, go to her YouTube channel, check out this one video, because she goes through everything on this one specific bronze amulet, and it's incredible. Just so much going on this one thing. It is really beautiful. And nowadays it would just we would say like, too busy, too many gods, too many things there. But this was wrought from a very active spiritual ecosystem that existed from whoever made that amulet. And it is so cool to see Dr. Dzwiza go through everything on this thing. So please, everybody, check that out. It'll be in the show notes, but it's so fascinating. And I love this period of time. And I understand exactly what you say. I love that analogy of the ocean, because yeah, it's so unbelievable. And I could talk about it for hours. I'm sure that you could as well. But it's so fascinating. So fascinating.
It is, and the really cool thing is that, or mind-blowing, inspiring, when you're into imagination, what an awesome feeling it is when something captures your imagination and gets your brain like, I want to know more about it, I want to think about it. And the thing is, if you look at an ancient magical artifacts, most people know the gems, because we have about like 5,000 more or less ancient magical gems. And if you look at the iconography, it's often like, oh yeah, there's this guy, he's wearing a dress, or got a spear here or something there. But actually, if you study ancient magic, and here again the manuals help, but of course the literature, the ancient literature about magic and religious systems and beliefs helps a lot there too, to understand actually that every single bit has a meaning.
Yeah.
And this becomes really, really clear when you read the eighth book of Moses, where you have, for this divination ritual, you have to engrave an artifact. You have to engrave a crocodile, and you have to engrave a nine-shaped deity, and then you have to engrave some more things. But the text describes actually that while you are drawing or engraving a crocodile and a nine-shaped deity and other things, they represent sounds. Right. They represent like this quieting sounds, like and popping sounds, which, no, I can't do that. Sorry, I tried, but I can't. But they represent different sounds which were believed to attract specific ancient deities. So you couldn't only invoke deities with secret names or with your prayers or invocations or praises. You could invoke them by sounds. And once you have a ritual instruction that describes this in such detail, really everyone should read it, because it's also steganography. Because it's, if you only see the image, you only see the image. Right. You don't know what it means. And that there is so much more meaning underlying or underneath these depictions, and everything has a meaning, and there is so much more. We don't know. We just see the images and think, oh yeah, another weird god, or another weird string of names, something like that. There is so much more information in there. There are studies where the names of sequence of secret names, for example, are analyzed, and it turns out that they have a certain numeric value. And in antiquity, you could replace, if a name has got, like, you add the letters and it adds up to 25, and you find another name which adds up to 25. In magic, that was kind of sympathetic. Right. And you could change this. You could create a relation. So there is so much information in every bit you see, in everything that is there. It's not just, some god that is there to represent a specific aspect, like the sun or power or rulership or whatever. There's usually much more in there, and that's really exciting to explore this.
Definitely. Are there certain gods or entities that seem to come up more than others on these artifacts, or like, why do you think that sometimes the ones that I know that Osiris gets put up there quite a bit, but is there any rhyme or reason, or is there things that you see more of than other figures?
Oh, well, yes, but so it's useful to keep in mind that all of the artifacts and rituals we know today do not reflect ancient realities one-on-one. So right. They are tiny random selection or sample of what once existed. And it also depends on the materiality of the artifacts and their context. So, for example, papyrus is always from Egypt. It doesn't mean that, there were no papyrus artifacts anywhere else. It's just they couldn't survive in the ground. Right. But they could in the Egyptian climate. So we have, for example, over 400 gems depicting Abraxas. A similar number with the Egyptian god Horus. Slightly less with Anubis, also an Egyptian deity, followed by Harpocrates depictions, all within like a bit over 300 gems depicting them. But while these are the most frequently depicted deities on gems, most of the gems we know today are from Egypt. So it might not be surprising that we find some of the most popular Egyptian deities among the most often depicted deities on gems.
Right.
So this is, yes, of course, they were among the most popular deities. So we could say, yeah, people loved Harpocrates or loved Horus or Anubis. The question is really what kind of valuable information about ancient magic this might tell us.
Right. What's interesting is that, as you say, these were put on gems a lot of times. And do you think that it would have been hard to procure gems? And would this be something that maybe people who maybe had a little bit more money within the area? Like it's tough to say because we don't know for sure. But the things that we do have that survive, particularly because of gems, they would not have been as easy to make as, say, just papyri. Correct?
Oh, absolutely, and they were probably much more expensive.
Yeah.
Well, there is one fundamental problem with the gems, and this is really important to keep in mind, and that is that it's currently the number of gems, of magical gems we have, is estimated between 2,500 and 5,000. And the problem is that the vast majority of these gems is not dated because we simply can't do this. Right. It's they are often like, when you can't apply paleographical reasons because the inscriptions are very short, and when you inscribe a gem, it's very different from writing with ink. So the characteristics of a writing of a specific kind of writing for a specific period of time, you don't see this reflected in the gems, and it's very difficult. The other thing is, and this is something it has to become more apparent. Modern scholarship has to become more aware of as well. Is that during you could say it started 15th, 16th, 17th, probably 17th century, what was really huge there, is that when antiquity was rediscovered in Europe, let's say it like that, and more gemstones, high quality engraved gemstones, not necessarily magic, but engraved with beautiful depictions of deities and inscriptions, rich European people, especially royals, became very interested in collecting these gems and in having those gems, and they hired people to get hands on these gems. But the knowledge about how to make these gems was lost. So among gem cutters, it became one of the gold standards to try to recreate, to relearn how these gems were engraved. So thousands and thousands and thousands of gems, of ancient gems, were copied as exactly as possible. So there was even, I think in 1749 or something, is one of the most important books was written about the comparison of ancient technologies or techniques for engraving and cutting gems compared to the modern ones at this time, and how to improve. And it was written originally in French, and it was translated in the same year into English. So that shows how popular and requested it was. So we got this on one hand, which means because they used the ancient tools, and because they copied the iconography, and even if the gem cutters then in the 16th, 17th, 18th century would have become creative, right, how would we be able to figure out that these are not ancient copies? Because they weren't labeled, and lots of these gems over the centuries, they ended up in some private collection, or you could auction them in something, and we don't exactly know who ordered them, for whom they were made, if they were actually ancient or not. So this is a problem. And another problem is that, of course, with the interest, and because people paid a lot of money, were willing to pay a lot of money for them, forgeries also drastically increased. We even have testimony in books where people write about their experience with forgers. And one famous forger, for example, had actually their workshop in the Colosseum in Rome.
Okay.
And we have a description of someone who came across this workshop, and who was offered by the one who ran the workshop the author says, well, he gave me like lots of gems just to be quiet and not to talk about it. And he said his workshop managed, or he sold the gems as quickly as they were made.
Wow.
So, and this is just one incident. So, and as long as people used like bronze tools or ancient tools to make these gems, it's basically impossible to identify them, except like you get some hints, like sometimes they made like it was popular, I think, during the Renaissance, that people wear high heels.
Ah.
So jump with high heels, some
Okay.
very clear iconographical characteristics that don't occur in antiquity. You can say, okay, right, it's not. So I would actually estimate, and there's a few colleagues who agree with that about half of the ancient magical gems we have are not ancient. They're not necessarily forgeries, but
Yeah.
And then of course the question is what kind of or what kind of iconography would have been copied, and that would have likely been the one people were most interested in, and that might have been Abraxas, for example, or as you said, like the popular gods, ancient Egyptian gods people knew about.
Yeah.
So the question is, as long as we have so many gems without archaeological context, if we have so many gems depicting Abraxas, Osiris, Hippocrates, or Horus, or whomever, are they really ancient?
Right. Yeah, it's a problem. Let's hone in on that thing that I just that you just mentioned, because I talked about it a little bit on an episode I did earlier, which was stones and gems and magic. But I talked about these things called Abraxas stones. So Kirsten, this is the thing.
That's on you now.
This is the thing that if people don't know what Abraxas stones are, I'll have a link in the show notes. Go to the show notes for this episode, click on it. You'll see these things, and they're very, very unique. But I have to ask you, what are they? What is the figure that's usually depicted on them? What were they used for? Maybe why are there so many of them? I mean, you might have just answered it, because a lot of them are forgeries because they look so interesting and so bizarre. But what are your perspectives on these incredible artifacts?
Potential forgeries. We don't know if they're forgeries.
Okay.
So what are Abraxas stones? Well, it's basically ancient gems depicting Abraxas. I know it's not a smart answer. So it's the Abraxas depictions. We find 90% of them, around 90%, on the gems. And but the vast majority of these gems, they don't tell us anything about their purpose. So let's start with the figure. What is depicted? The figure that is depicted is called the angipes, which basically translates to snake-footed. So it's the angipes is a composite figure. So he has the head of a cock, the body of a man wearing a Roman armor, and it's the Roman armor. It's the armor of the emperor.
Oh.
They have the angipes has two coiled snakes as legs. So they can be depicted differently, like with, more, how do you say, more rings or less rings or whatever, depending on the how talented the engraver was. So the angipes also usually holds a whip in his right hand and a shield, mostly round, in his left hand.
Right.
And the figure is often, but not always, and not necessarily exclusively, accompanied by the name Abraxas. And in the shield, we often have the name Iao. So the problem with this figure is, like, the cock had a human body with an armor, and then the legs of a snake. There is no direct, like, Egyptian, Greek, or Roman iconographic tradition of this figure. So we have to reconstruct. There is a Hellenistic and Ptolemaic deity called Agathos Daimon, literally translate the good daimon, he was depicted with the body of a snake, and he was equated with the ancient Egyptian god of fate, who was called Shai.
Chai. Yes.
Who was also depicted. Egyptian deities always had like an animal, or they had a sacred animal, and they could take the shape of this animal. And the animal of Shai was a serpent. So, but none of them, neither Shai nor Agathos Daimon, were actually depicted with two snake legs. So we have in Greek, to look at the potential Greek origin, we have the giants, the giants who fought the Olympian gods. And the giants do have two snake legs.
Okay.
But it kind of doesn't really fit here as well. To depict like, giants who fought like Zeus and co, the Olympian gods. When we take a look at the list of the names accompanying the Angipes, this list is astonishingly, it's rather brief. We have the Egyptian sun god, which is written Fre or Fra in the Greek period, but which is Ra, and it's the only one not belonging to Jewish traditions, because all the other names accompanying the Angipes are from the Jewish tradition. It's like Iao, Zabaoth, Adonai.
Right.
So, but Gideon Bar-Hag, who's one of the leading experts in ancient Jewish magic and who wrote the book it's called Ancient Jewish Magic, he wrote that the origins of the Angipes and of Abraxas remain obscure, but the search for Jewish explanation says more about like the ingenuity or the imagination of modern scholars than actually about iconography of ancient Jewish magic. So he says the origin is not in ancient Jewish magic. And if you look at, around the cultures that influenced magic at that time, we have the Persian culture and the Persian Vendidat, which is a text compilation belonging to, I don't know how to pronounce this in English, Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism, yeah.
Thank you. The Vendidat says that the cock was created in opposition to demons and wizards. So here we would have a potential reason for why there's so many of these depictions of Abraxas, in that they were understood in context of some kind of amulets to protect against demons, because demons in antiquity, everything was demons.
Right.
Like, we're sick, demons. Something bad happened, demons. Demons were everywhere.
Yes.
And the cock is also regarded in several cultures as a solar creature, simply because, at the morning when the sun rises, they
make noise. They'll let you know it's morning.
Yeah. And that might be one of the reasons why the gems are interpreted as apotropaic amulets, actually. So as evil averting amulets. And the most extensive analysis of the Angiped and Abraxas, actually, and the Abraxas gems was published by Arpad Naj in 2019. He's the one who actually initiated the Campbell Bonner Magical Gems database. And I do have some of his quotes. I brought some of his quotes. So if you wouldn't mind, I would read them.
Please,
because
absolutely.
I think that says a lot. It doesn't mean that, I wouldn't agree with everything, but his study is based on, I think he compiled something like 739 artifacts depicting the Angipes and ancient sources. So this is really the most fundamental study. And I will send you the link because it's available for free online. And he's got a really huge bibliography. So everyone of our audience who would love to know more about Abraxas can just simply go there and look up the literature there.
Definitely.
So here's some quotes from Arpad. He says that the Angipes iconography was a one-time creation. There is nothing to suggest when it was created, but on stylistic grounds, one may venture that this could hardly have happened before the late 1st century AD. This glyptical production continued until the 4th century, which brought about a gradual general decline in glyptics. So with the material Arpad compiled, he could say that, in the late 1st century AD, the Abraxas came up and became popular, but it didn't make it over the 4th century.
No.
The invention of the Angipes amulet belongs to a layer, so it's another quote, belongs to a layer of imperial period religion, which is beginning to be referred as the religion of freelance ritual experts. That is actually the academic term for magicians.
Okay.
And he says that the ethnicity and religion of the inventor of the Angipes shame is unknown. So Arpad thinks really that was a single person who created or who's responsible for this creation. His product, the Angipes scheme, is the most important invention of the creators of magical gems. It was a great attempt at integrating Deus Israel into the gods of the imperial period magical coinage, so common practice, through images as well as names. And the engravers enriched this magical coinage with 2 new traits, one of them a revolutionary novelty. They created a new scheme. So this is basically the composition of what the Angipes looks like.
Right.
Cock head, human body, and snake legs. So they created a new scheme to make the unpresentable visible, because Arpad thinks that it is not a Jewish tradition, but is a Judaizing. Do you say it like this?
Yeah.
Judaizing tradition.
Yeah.
And so this was because in Judaism, there is no image of God.
Right.
And you can't even pronounce the name. And Arpad thinks that this was a way to make the unrepresentable visible.
Okay.
So the other important thing is that their amulets, which were worn as jewelry, made some par excellence elements of Judaica, so of Jewish belief, visible in everyday life. So the words Iao, Adonai, and Sabaoth, be they engraved on the gems in their own meaning or as magical names, remained in their pure Jewish form. So the last quote is that on a wider horizon, however, the invention of the Angipes scheme proved unsuccessful. Its fragile creativity vanished in the imperial period battle of religious words. The scheme stayed within the realms of amulets and could not surpass the bounds of the pagan magical coinage, as if a philosopher's thoughts were limited to his mother tongue. So that's how he explains that, that there are no amulets beyond the 4th century.
Right.
So I thought this is really, really interesting. We do have, in terms of Abraxas, we do have some literary sources. But what we know about Abraxas from ancient sources is basically from Christian authors, which were not really happy about.
No.
Abraxas, pagan religions.
Right.
And so that these sources have to be treated really carefully. It is believed, but one idea is that there is, I think, as many scholars as there are from individual fields, as many ideas about the origin of Abraxas and the Angipes and
the word Abraxas itself. Yes.
That's something. It's Egyptian. Well, I really wouldn't see Egyptian words there. Others, there is. I'm not familiar with all of the theories.
Right.
But there is a lot of different ideas. But what is actually missing is any ancient sources that would help us make better understanding. So Abraxas is agnostic, occurs in Gnosticism, occurs in as God, as Archon, as someone with the power about fate again. This 365, and in terms of cosmogonies, do you say cosmogonies?
Cosmogonies, yeah.
Cosmogonies, thank you. In terms of cosmogonies and cosmogonical conceptions, he certainly played an important role, because if you have Abraxas, Greeks didn't have separate symbols for their numerals. They used the alphabet. So the name Abraxas, the letters of the name Abraxas add up to the number 365. And in Gnosticism, there was one, Gnosticism isn't just one belief. They had a lot of different ideas as well. And one idea was that there are 365 spirit realms, and the Abraxas was a secret word which summarized or comprised all these words. And that sounds plausible, because Abraxas has this 365 in the name. The interesting thing is, but when we look at the ritual manuals again,
Right.
maybe tell me when I'm too long. Well, when it's too long. But
I love it.
The interesting thing is always, like, it's one thing to look at authors, ancient authors, and what they wrote about magic, but it's not a primary source. It's people who observed this, but who didn't practice themselves. And it's really great yet to look again at the manuals, and we do actually have. So I've brought example for 2 Abraxas gems that are described. The manufacturing and use is described in the magical papyri, and here we can see, to come back to a question, what were they used for actually, and because the gems often don't tell us, we have. One unique ritual act is described in PGM 61. That is a love spell of attraction. And it says, and I quote it here, it's, during the ritual, wear an iron ring with you, on which a Hippocrates is engraved, sitting on a lotus, and his name is Abraxas.
Oh.
But if you want, so it's about bringing in a woman. And this is the only ritual instruction I'm aware of where not only that it's described how to bring in a woman,
right,
but how to release her. And it's really weird, because it says, if you want to bring the NN, and N is basically, it's like, fill in name here.
Put your name here, yeah.
Back to rest. Take a solar scarab, place it in the middle of her head, and say to it, consume my love spell, you image of Helios. He himself commands you to do it. And then it says, pick it up again and release it alive, so the scarab. Yep. And then take the ring with the inscribed Hippocrates on the lotus, who is called Abraxas, and give it to her to wear. And immediately she will be released. So this is weird in so many things.
Yeah.
Is identified with Hippocrates sitting on a lotus. So we have a very typical Egyptian deity.
Yeah.
Fundamental Egyptian deity, who is identified with Abraxas, and we have them in context of a love spell. And then it's a love spell where, because when you hand down, or if you hand the ring to the woman, give it her to wear, she will know that you cast a spell on her.
Right.
This is really weird, and I thought I want to share this with you.
Absolutely.
It's good. And we see that Abraxas was also associated, or was thought, not only in terms of cosmogonies or protection, but here also in context of a love spell.
Yeah.
And then we have in a ritual for success and good luck, and this good luck reminds us a bit of Agathos Daimon again. Yes. This one is preserved in PGM 12. The practitioner has to inscribe a light blue jasper, which is kind of, I don't know if I've ever seen a light blue jasper, with the names of Iao, Sabaoth, and Abraxas. And the engraved gem has to be set in a golden ring and worn in purity. So this is what I love about the manuals, because they give you details like you have to wear it in purity, you mustn't eat flesh, you mustn't have sex, or, you have to be pure for X days. So here you have to wear this ring in purity in order to be successful and to get good luck. And in context of another love spell involving 2 wax figures, a lot of people know this kind of ancient magic. Of these 2 wax figures, one has to be pierced with 30 needles.
Right.
And then a lead tablet has to be tied to the figure with 365 knots.
Hey.
While tying these knots, imagine how much work it is. So you have to tie this lead tablet and you have two wax figures. So you have to put them all together with 365 knots, knots. And the practitioner has to recite Abraxas, hold her fast, potentially 365 times. So here again, we have Abraxas in the context of love.
Yeah.
I really like this. There's a few more amulets that are not so present in the head and associated with Abraxas. But we have, for example, a bronze amulet from France, dated to the 2nd century, against hail. So, and here Abraxas is invoked, among others. But Abraxas is invoked, so in France, in the 2nd century, against hail. Very different from all the contexts we know from the gems.
Right.
We have a gold amulet from, I think you say Thrace.
Thrace.
Yeah. For protection against male and female demons, dated to the 2nd and 3rd century. So here we don't have a depiction of Abraxas, but he does actually occur again with other names of higher powers, but here specifically actually to protect against male and female demons. One artifact that I do want to share here too is because it's very different, because I think Arpad doesn't mention it in his study, and it's a papyrus amulet from Egypt against fever, dated to the 4th century, so rather the later bit in terms of Arpad's study. And it says, Jesus Christ, Father, Mother, Holy Spirit, Alpha and Omega, Abraxas. So here it's not the Jewish context, but clearly a Christian context.
Yeah.
So this is really, really weird.
Yeah.
I think it shows that Abraxas was probably like, it was a new deity. So it was not ancient Egyptian. It was some innovation, but there was not one rule of what he could do about his powers, how you could invoke him, or how he could help you. It was a lot of different ideas, and I think this is typical for ancient magic as well, that there is not one god with one specific power, but that they were all kind of multilingual and multifunctional.
Right.
And I think Abraxas is a good is a good example here, because we have so many testimonies. But most of the times people are aware of this weird iconography, this cock-headed human body with these 2 snake legs, which is really looks like it. And actually in Christianity later, Abraxas was, to say, denounced as an evil demon.
Yeah,
but basically Christianity did this with every pagan god. So but this is what sticks in our mind. There's a snake leg and it's demon, it's Satan, or it's the devil, or whatever. Right. But actually it was a very rather useful, positive god in ancient magic, very powerful, but also very distinctive. And that might be another reason why he was so popular, because you didn't draw on other older cultures. Right. You have this significant Egyptian aspect or Greek aspect or Jewish aspect, or in the inscriptions as well. You do, but not in the iconography, which jumps into your mind first. So that might be one of the reasons he was so interesting, because it was it has its own identity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for people listening, and I've just been smiling ear to ear here listening to Kirsten talk, because
awesome.
This is the kind of stuff that I find so fascinating. It's not the stuff that we know. It's the stuff we don't know, particularly about these artifacts. And what was so interesting about the Abraxas stones, and why I bring them up as an example, is because, just as Kirsten mentioned, it was short-lived. I mean, 300 years or so of massive influence, and then it just disappears. Like, it's just kind of gone as far as people making amulets and putting this name down. So the thing that I love about this stuff is as I just said, it's not so much all the things we know, it's the things we don't know and the mystery, because where the mystery is, that's where our imagination are able to try and fill the blanks as to, wow, like where did this come from? How is this utilized in all of these amazing things? So I truly love the Abraxas stones, and I hope people would go and look up some of these incredible, and some of them are beautiful. There's some of them are just stunningly detailed. They're really gorgeous. But I have to ask you, Kirsten, do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite magical artifact? Is there a magical artifact like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever?
Oh, tons.
Okay.
It basically, every time I do some new research, like for a video or a blog post, mostly for videos actually, it's like I come across something new. And I recently came across one, and it's a totally new kind of artifact I wasn't really aware of. And that is an artifact that is described in the ritual manual PGM1. And it's a ritual to invoke a divine assistant, a paedros. And you start this, it's a bit, it's the most powerful paedros ritual, actually. So your paedros, if you manage to invoke this paedros, it's basically, you got word power. But there is, as basically with every ritual, there is how you say it, a trap or a trick, because this is so cool. At the very beginning, you have to do a kind of initiatory ritual. And you perform this, and why you perform this, it is described in the instruction, that a falcon comes from the sky and sits down in front of you, and he drops a stone. And then he leaves. And you have to pick up this stone and engrave it with the figure of a Helios Horus. And then you have to drill a hole through it and put a thread around it, and then you have to wear it around your neck. And this is so cool, because, I mean, how does it work? Perform a ritual, and it's not that you go and buy a stone or pick a laurel root to inscribe it or get a piece of papyrus. You have to get this falcon who drops a stone.
Yes.
This is so, I mean, in terms of imagination, how does someone get there?
Right.
It's another kind of, protecting knowledge thing that, to make it, is it just, it isn't meant, is it meant literally, or is it just, some kind of encryption, and does it mean something else? Or was it actually meant literally? And I'm so fascinated by this. I can't stop thinking about this. And this is currently my favorite magical artifact. I mean, imagine a magical artifact you can't get yourself. You need the support of a falcon who brings you this stone. This is really cool.
I have to say, I live on the ocean, and a lot of birds here use rocks, and not only. Actually, I'll say this. Some birds pick up shellfish, things like clams or oysters. They pick them up and then they drop them on concrete, particularly where people walk, to break them open. But also seagulls, they pick up rocks and they drop them sometimes on clusters of mussels and things like that to break them open to go and eat. Anyways, just saying, like, I'm not trying to solve the mystery of this artifact, but it's interesting.
This is really amazing, because and it's cool information, because there is basically only these options, that it's an encryption,
right?
It's not to be taken literally. It is really that a falcon must come and drop this, and this would be something usually deriving from observation,
right?
It's not something you make up out of nothing, but it's something you observed. And seriously, I don't know. I didn't think about this. So I'm going to look up falcons and the habits of Egyptian falcons, if they do something like this as well. Because this could really be. And then there would be a probability that if you repeat the ritual often enough, or if you do it, let's say, somewhere where falcons, do you say nest or live?
Yeah.
There is a certain chance that this really happens. So thank you for this information. wasn't aware of it. So that's awesome. So you can.
I've been walking. I walk by the ocean, and the next thing you know, like I'll be on this.
Got a fish on your head.
And then things will fall right in front of me, clunk, and it's like, oh yeah, they're trying to get a meal. It's incredible. Yeah. Is there a magical artifact you think that people that really like my show would just be like, oh man, that's so interesting? You brought up some things like the Pergamon divination kit. Is there a magical artifact that you're just like, man, people need to know more about this thing?
Yeah, I know which magical artifact I would love to see more people putting their brains on, and that's the brass disc from Pergamon. Okay. And you can either I think you maybe can add a photo of this.
I will have it in awesome. I will have it in the show notes, people. So yeah, I actually have 3 links that people can click on. I'll have the museum where it's in, which is I believe in German. Just trying to read the page, but I've also got 2 other links there for people can look it up. It's really fascinating.
Because this is this round disc. And I've been, it is the whole Pergamon kit, this tool set of a magician is kept in Berlin. And a few years ago, I had the chance to spend 3 days there and to observe the artifacts on spot. So I was able to hold this disc in my hand and to analyze it. And this is so fascinating. So would it be okay if I describe it?
Please do. Please do.
Okay. I it's probably not or it's not too easy. I try. So imagine you have a disc, and I would say it's about, I don't know exactly, 15 centimeters maybe in diameter. So it's flat on the top, but it's slightly round on the bottom. So it perfectly fits into a hand. And if you draw a horizontal line and make it into 3 equally large pieces, the middle part is exactly the size of the center circle. And this center circle of the disc is divided into 8 pieces, like 8 pieces of cake, and they are all of a different size, and which is really weird. So they are all inscribed with vowel sequences and a magic sign, but you can have like only a few vowels, but it's the largest field, and the smallest field has like so many vowels that they are inscribed in 2 lines. So the size of the secret name or vowel sequence is not the reason for the different sizes. That these 8 fields, it's 8 fields, and that they are of different sizes is relevant because on the outside of this inner circle there is 3 registers, or like 3 more circles which are inscribed, and they are divided into 8 fields, which altogether 3 times 8 is 24. And basically these 8 fields are perfect. They have all the same size. Yes. And they're perfectly divided, and you have 12 fields on the right side and 12 fields on the left side. And so far the interpretations focused on it's for divination, and it has to do, it's 24 fields and it's 24 letters of the Greek alphabet. So that has to do with letters. And another interpretation, but that's old and it has been refuted by many, is that it has to do with Egyptian hieroglyphs, and that the tarot actually derives from this disc and from the fields, and has its origin in this disc and in Egyptian hieroglyphs. So, but what I recently wondered about is when it's 24 fields and they are so perfectly separated. You know, in ancient Egyptian astronomy, you have, or in others too, but the ancient Egyptians had like 24 hours a day, and it's always 12 hours the night, 12 hours the day. Yes. The hours can differ in length, which is really weird to us, but it's perfectly 12 hours a night, 12 hours a day. And I wondered if this could be a reason, because every hour has a specific deity. So we have deities of the hours. If this could be like, if the disc could be related to astrology rather. And then I wondered, and this is why I want so many people, as many people as possible, to put their brain on this. Yeah. I wondered, because there was always the question, why is it so perfectly crafted? Mm-hmm. And then the center circle with this 8 different fields, they are of different sizes. so irregular. It looks terrible.
Yeah.
And I wondered, because if you look at Egyptian astronomy and the deacons, for example,
Yeah.
they capture or they take different sizes. Like the deacons each deacon represents a week. So we have 36 deacons, and the Egyptian calendar had 36 weeks, with 10 days each. So I wonder if the different sizes of the center could have anything to do with astronomical constellation, with star constellations. But I don't know really much about this. So if anyone listens and knows more about this, I would love to hear if there might be any relation or potential connection. And the other thing is, why is it 8?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I recently learned there is the concept of having 7 planetary spheres and then an outer sphere, that in Gnosticism.
Right.
So is this something maybe? But this disc it's one of the most beautiful, one of the most perfectly crafted artifacts. The inscriptions, I mean, it's bronze. It's really, it's not easy to make inscriptions there. But the signs, it's completely inscribed with magic signs, except for the center where you have the bubble sequence. So it's the most mysterious artifact I can actually think of.
Yeah, it's incredibly fascinating, and I'm so glad you brought it up. And people listening, particularly all of the people that are really fascinated with the ancient astrology, put eyes on this thing, because it is one of those things that I learned about it ages ago, and then it just kind of was in the background, and it wasn't until you reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, because there's not just a disc. There's other aspects to the kit, is there not? There's like it's like a stand kind of thing that gets put with it.
Yeah, there is actually, but it's called the Pergamon kit.
Yeah,
we have more recent publications about this, and it's definitely not. It has been reconstructed. We have this triangular table, and in the middle of this is this little how do you say it, podest? This little you can put something on. Yeah. And the construction of this Pergamon kit has been that you have this triangular table. It's actually dedicated to Hecate. And on top of this, you put the disc. And then we have a nail that you put in the wall, and you put a thread and ring. And this reconstruction of this kit is a nightmare. So it's crap. It doesn't work at all. You can't, the disc itself, can't, if you put it on a desk, it's not perfectly weighed or balanced.
Right.
So the idea, the reconstruction so far, is that you put this disc on this podium thing on the triangular tablet and turn it with your finger so that it spins. But if you would make it spin, it doesn't spin.
No, it doesn't spin. It's not weighted properly.
It simply falls off. So to say that. So this doesn't work. And I think we really have to see the Pergamon kit as those were tools for a magician, and likely for the same magician, because the quality is very similar.
Right.
But it's not. It wasn't used all together at once.
Okay.
Like different tools for different performances, ritual performances.
Got it. Yeah, the thing that's fascinating that I found it, but yes, there's this little stand, and it's got Hecate, which is people whenever you mention Hecate in a magical context these days, people are like, oh, that's awesome, because everybody loves Hecate and things like that. But it's people who are fascinated with ancient astrology, put some eyes on the Pergamon disc. It's really quite incredible. And let's see if we can come up with something, because it is indeed very fascinating. I'm going to direct our attention away from the Pergamon kit for a second here, because there's a joke that's told by field researchers that they should do excavations of their own museum, which is kind of funny, but it does say something kind of stark, which is just that there's a situation that we have, and this was the same situation at the museum that I would work at, which was like two-thirds of what they had wasn't on display, or it just wasn't being looked at. They were stashed away. So how many artifacts are just sitting in museums and haven't even been looked at or studied, do you think? Is it really bad, or do you think that because magical artifacts are so interesting, most of them are brought out?
I think first I have to share this image you just put into my mind, that is like this the archives of a museum are always or usually subterranean. So I see this subterranean thing, really huge place, and it's totally dusty and full of sand. And I see all the archaeologists with their helmets sitting there, excavating the museum,
tearing open the boxes with crowbars.
So I think the reality is rather that about 95% of the artifacts are in the basement and not on display. And I don't even know if the magical artifacts are really, like, see, for example, the Pergamon kid, that was for most of the time, it wasn't on display. I don't even know it's still on display now. It has been taken out again. I think the fundamental problem, or the core problem, is that there are so many artifacts, and once you excavate them, you have to store them properly in order that they don't decay, or in order to preserve them. And another problem is that there is just simply not enough experts to research and publish all of the artifacts, especially when they are inscribed. See, there is still thousands of cuneiform tablets. There is literally millions of inscribed papyrus fragments from just the Oxyrhynchos dump site. So in ancient Egypt, you have dump sites of papyri, and the Oxyrhynchos dump site is, like, I think it was in use for over 900 years.
Right.
So there is millions of papyri fragments, inscriptions there. There are simply not enough people familiar with the languages, and you don't only need to be able to read the languages, because it's very often that you have, like, words that are unique, or that didn't occur anywhere else, or the context. Like, I'm preparing a new translation of this London Line magical papyrus. It's an Egyptian demotic magical papyrus. And the moment you come to ritual instruction, where you have an invocation, for example, with a mythological background that is not known to us today, and you have holes in the papyrus, it's basically possible, or it's such a challenge to reconstruct it. And I need to contact experts in like about the religious background of a white crocodile. I was crazy, and I couldn't find any parallels for white crocodile, for example. So you don't only need the people who are familiar with the language, but also with the content, or who are capable of potentially recreating the content. And this is why so much of so many artifacts are not exhibited, inscribed or not inscribed, because it's simply, there hasn't been the resources to study them properly. And then the other question is always, okay, what is the audience interested in?
Right.
Museums need to make money, and magic wasn't really perceived as something very interesting. Yesterday I came across on social media, on Mastodon, there is, in a German museum in Halle, there will be an exhibition about ancient magic.
Cool.
And I thought, oh wow, this is really cool. But it's not really, it becomes more popular also, so not only among academics, but also among the public. But I think there is still a certain kind of, maybe fear, how do I call it?
Hesitation. There's a hesitation.
Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly. If you would make an exhibition about ancient magic or ancient herbs or something like that, people will probably be much easier with the topic, even though ancient magic can be just as scary as ancient magic.
Right.
Yeah? It's pretty awful what if you read some of the recipes and what they did actually.
Yes.
So but I think we're currently at a point where the fascination is growing bigger than the hesitation.
Yeah.
So there are really, literally, we have thousands of magical artifacts, so it would be really cool to see more.
Definitely. Yeah. It's funny because I think only 15 years ago or so, somewhere in London, they put up an exhibition of John Dee, the Elizabethan magician. But I was like, I believe it was one of the medical museums, and they excised as much of Dee's magic from it as possible. Like it was like an afterthought. It's like, and John Dee thought he talked to angels, but let's talk about all the other stuff. I think that these days now it's like people want to know about this aspect of John Dee. They want to know. So I think you are right. I think that this interest is going to start to become a bigger thing, because even if you don't think magic is real, the fact that magic played such a huge role in people's lives in the past is something that is very fascinating to people. And I really hope, I mean, my podcast in a way is kind of like, I'm popular enough that I can do this as a day job, that, you know, people really do like this stuff. They find it very fascinating. So I think we're always in very interesting times. I have to ask this question, and you have zero pressure to answer this one, but have you had anything strange happen to you while you're looking at these ancient artifacts? Has there been like books flying off the shelf or anything like that? You don't have to answer, because of course.
No. I love to. Actually, not in this way, but when the research I was recently working on, this secret list of code words for ritual ingredients in Magical Papyrus PGM 12. This was really weird, because usually if you do research, there's rather sooner than later, you get to a point where, you know, okay, from here on, everything is assumption. Right. You know, there's just not more information, no more ancient sources that at hand that would help you to draw clear conclusions, or conclusions you can base on, you know, or you can support with ancient sources. And when I started this research, I thought, you know, the scholarship to this list of secret code words for ritual ingredients really stops at that point. They start with the assumption, the list and the introduction to it, and the author, that can all not be taken at face value. It's made up. It's invented to attract customers, and basically there it stops.
Right.
When I started to look deeper into, you know, I started like, okay, do these ritual ingredients occur somewhere else? And, you know, the standard thing in the magical papyri. Yes, they do. Do they occur outside the magical papyri in ancient manuscripts? Yes, they do. And it kept on going like this. And every time I asked every question I asked, new question, you know, I became a bit braver, or, you know, it was like more bold. Yeah. And literally every question I could answer. I found ancient sources who could answer this. It still doesn't mean it's the only possible answer or the conclusion I finally came up with, but it really felt like fate is intervening.
It's guiding, perhaps.
Really, seriously, it was exactly like this. What it was like at the end, it was like, okay, then let's ask one more question. And really, I'm going to upload the video in about 2 weeks, and I hope a lot of people watch it, because it shows you that this prejudice, this bias towards ancient magic from the academic side, that, you know, a lot of it is fake and fraud and invented to trick people, and it was just it's made up to make money and to attract customers. This attitude leads to the point that we really miss most of the information that is available, and most of there is so much more knowledge in there, and at the end I came to a point, it was really like the final puzzle that was missing, and all of a sudden, for some weird reason on Google, it's like it came up a papyrus fragment and everything resolved. Was like, what's going on? And this is something where I thought, this is weird. This is really weird. So I didn't have books flying, or I, you know, but I didn't try actually. And when I started recently for 2 lectures to recreate these divination rituals, I really thought, you know, I would love to look for rituals in the magical papyri which can be recreated. You know, which there's for example one divination with a brass bowl you inscribe on all kinds of sites, and the invocation is there. You don't need to make any animal sacrifices or something like this. So I thought I would love to recreate this. and to just see what happens. If someone who comes from an academic perspective and tries them, if something actually comes up, or what kind of experience happens there. So this would be something I would love to try.
I know for myself, I can speak for myself, and we talked a little bit beforehand before the microphones were turned on. Like I actively do rituals and have done rituals from the Greek magical papyri and stuff like that, and people are giving them a shot. And yes, here's this thing, and I hope this doesn't creep you out in any way. I have found that when I do stuff from the PGM, I get some of the most odd, like it's very odd results. it's and sometimes scary stuff. There's this, it's kind of like not an infamous, but it's a story I tell where instead of using a bowl for scrying and looking into a water basin from the PGM, I used the surface of an iPad, and very strange stuff started happening. I really think that there's something about these documents, and it's this idea that it was just to make money is frankly insulting to humanity. To me, it's insulting to the capacity of human beings. People still today take this stuff very seriously. We have to pay currency to that. So that's all I'll say. I think that this magic is still very much alive. I'll just say that.
You can't, you can't just drop something like that and then not share it. This is awfully awesome, interesting.
Yeah,
this absolutely. I would, because I spent the last weeks like hours in my spare time to look for a bronze bowl that looks silver, because that's what you would need for one of the rituals that can be recreated, and that's really difficult.
Yeah.
So, unless you want to spend like €1,000, which I don't have.
Right.
So this is really a challenge. But the idea to use the reflective screen of an iPad, that's really weird and brave. So
it didn't turn out okay.
I would love to know one day what you saw and what you experienced, what was happening. This is really interesting.
I talk about other people's podcasts about it. Just strange stuff started happening. Strange electrical stuff started happening in the house that I was at. Not while I was doing it. It just, nothing really happened when I was looking at the thing. But afterwards, very strange stuff started happening. It was very bizarre. And even like the people whose house I was staying at, I was visiting, they were like, "Is something going on here?" Like they were actually saying stuff like, "There's weird stuff happening right now." Like things turning on and off. It was bizarre. That's all I'm going to say. I have to ask. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you should document this. You should.
Oh, I did.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah. It was very funny. I have to ask, what's the most surprising or amazing thing that you've discovered in since looking at these artifacts specifically? Like looking at this stuff, like what is the one thing that you're like, wow, that is so interesting, and I was not expecting that?
I actually think it's the variety and the richness of human creative imagination, attempting to explain how divine power or dynamis is the Greek term most often, can actually be channeled, and to turn these explanations into rituals and artifacts. I think this is what I find most amazing and surprising with every time I even if I've read a ritual instruction before, when I read it again or go deeper into, because the English translations, they're okay if you want to get a first impression, but they are very often, they are compromises, right? Because but the Greek terms can, it's like with more or less every foreign language, you got Greek terms which can mean very different things. The translations, if I look at the Greek text, they are often different from the translations, and you can see there is much more depth. One example is that you find a lot of magic in the Betz translation of the Greek magical papyri. But if you look at, like, you find magic powers, magic here, magic stuff, magic everywhere. But if you look at the Greek terms, the term magia is only attested 5 times in all of the magical papyri.
Right.
You have very rich world of thoughts behind what in the translation is just magic. And this is something that surprises and amazes me over and over again if you look at the Greek terminology, the technical terminology, because it reveals so much more about the actual thoughts and ideas behind these rituals, on which these rituals, and especially their effectiveness, their efficacy is based upon. So it's not all magic. It's dynamis. It's oikonomia. So I think I got 12 different terms there, and you start to see that magic was not, or this what people performed there, the powers they drew upon. It's not one magic.
No.
There's very different concepts and ideas how power is channeled, how higher powers can be addressed, can be communicated with, can be associated with, can be met, can even be identified with, or up to the degree that you incorporate their powers. And there's so many different ideas and options in the Greek and the Egyptian text, which is lost in the English translation. So this is something I find that keeps fascinating me.
Yeah, definitely. It is wonderful, and it's very true within the Betts translation. I mean, they did just release. There was a new book that was released not too long ago. Yeah, but I've all my notes are in my my Betts translation. Is that everything is just kind of like, it's very bare bones. Like, this is for this kind of thing, and it's like, but that's such a huge amount of things that, like, it's a very broad category, and Betts is just like, it's that one thing. And unless, I get it. And he was trying to do a translation job, and it's really tough. A lot of nuance was kind of squeezed out of the translation for these scrolls.
But Betts basically is great because you got all at one hand, and it really helps you to get a fundamental idea and to see the richness. But if you really want to work or want with the magic, or you want to understand it in more detail, the new publication is from Chris Farron and Sophia Toralis Tovar.
Yes.
And this will be, I think it starts April 4th or something like this. You
20th.
will actually
April 20th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You can download it. So currently, if you're in desktop mode, you can read the publication online, but you can't download it. The advantage is, compared to Betts, that you got the Greek in there.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you really want to dive deeper, you have the chance to look up the Greek and to get a better idea.
Definitely.
What says, and you got much more comments there. What's not so good is that it's the first volume, and I think it's 30 something papyri, I think.
Yeah.
So, and the big ones like PGM4 and PGM7 is
PGM4 is so big.
yeah.
Oh dear. Again, I still think that we're in very exciting times because people are very interested in this kind of stuff. So we're coming to the end here, Kirsten. So for folks who want to explore more about these artifacts, where do you suggest they begin? I know where I would suggest them. I love what you do on your website and your YouTube channel. That's a great place to start as well, particularly with your videos. They're so wonderfully and finely detailed. But for people that just like, I want to know more about Abraxas stones. I want to know more about the kind of place that this came from. Where would you tell them to go?
Well, for the gems, there is an awesome online source, and that's the Campbell Bonner Magical Gems database. And here I think they got over 5,000 gems and depictions of gems in the database. And you can look up, you can type in Abraxas or Horus or Hecate, whatever you want, and you get all the gems. You get a really great overview of the gems, and they got photographs of the vast majority of gems. So you actually get the chance to see these primary sources. You don't get a drawing or description. You can see them yourself. So this is really the best source I can think of for gems. And they also have like the standard publication, for gems is from Campbell Bonner, who is the name giver to the database, Studies in Magical Amulets, chiefly Greco-Egyptian. It's from 1950. And I think the GEMS database is the only online resource where you can download this book. If you are interested more in like lamelle, so in the gold, silver, bronze artifacts, it's definitely Roy Kotansky, Greek Magical Amulets. And you can find this one when you look online as well. For the papyri, it's bets the magical papyri. For the curse tablets, I think it's a bit more difficult. It's still probably Gauger, curse tablets and binding spells. So you get a nice overview there. It's not available online, but it's available as a paperback, and it's not really expensive. And the same is for Coptic magic. So Meyer and Smith wrote in 1994 this book about ancient Christian magic.
Awesome.
What I love about these books is they don't write about magic. They give you translations of the primary sources of the amulets and of the ritual instructions. So you don't, you get less biased. You don't have an interpretation of something or what someone thinks or not thinks. You actually read the ancient texts, and I love that. And really nice book as an introduction into Egyptian magic based on artifacts is Geraldine Pinch, Magic in Ancient Egypt. It's based on the artifacts from the British Museum, so maybe people might be hesitant there, but it's really, really, she's got a great talent to make things, it's not complicated what she writes. You can really follow it. You keep it in your mind. You get all the images there. So, so these would be the first, the sources to start from.
Definitely. Fantastic. And again, when you go to Kirsten's website, there's also lots of links there to where to find certain information, and all of the sources are always there. So it's fantastic as well. I'm just going to speak personally for myself. I love magical artifacts, not just because, I was a fan of Indiana Jones, but that aspect and sentiment that I talked about a little bit earlier is that I find them fascinating, not because of all we know about them, but what we don't know about them. And it just fires the imagination. I'm speaking as a practical magician. Sometimes going with the mystery of something is far more important than going with the actual explanations of absolutely everything. It doesn't mean I play fast and loose with certain things that are written down, because I do think that this stuff is long tenured, and I do believe there's some kind of a currency that occurs when you look at these texts, or even when you look at depictions within something tangible like artifacts. But Kirsten is right. These things exist on a plane of imagination, which does not mean fancy, and it does not mean that it's fake. It just means that it's a different way in which these things were expressed, and it came from a different place. And it means that the information gleaned through things like imagination can be, if we choose, can be as important as the actual factual things written about them, say in places like museums or scholarly works. So Kirsten, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been just absolutely amazing. I absolutely love everything you do. Please I've just knocked the table. I'm very animated when I've been talking today. Let people know where they can find your work and what you're getting up to, please. Cause I want people to find what you get up to. It's really wonderful.
I think the best way to start is actually my Patreon account, because it's for free, and you can get a lot of links, like to my blog, to my videos. You get updates what I'm working on, like the video now. One of the next videos is about the so-called Vocus Magicae, for example, what they are, what they are not, or about the Pergamon kit. So you're always on up to date. Let's see. I take the chance and make now the announcement that my 2 books about ancient magic science will be released on June 30th.
Oh, okay.
30th June for supporters, and for the rest of the world sometimes in September.
Wonderful.
So it's a source book about magic science and a catalog for ancient magic science. So I'll be working on this, and I will post more updates then. So from March 1st, I will be kind of locked down. And I will post like updates on Patreon too. And so this is where you get most of the information. And then on Twitter, I post regularly quotes from the magic papyri, and yes, my YouTube channel, and I really hope to have more time for making, what I would love. And it's actually, because usually my videos take about 3 to 5 months because of the research.
Yeah.
And so I thought, what would be really nice? They are so cool, like the prayers in the magical papyri. Recently, I came across one where the 14 sounds and the 28 symbols of the moon goddess are described. So this is awesome. I thought, okay, what would be great? To pronounce them, to speak them in English, and imagine to speak them in Greek, and to have an audience be able to listen. I mean, of course, I have a dialect, but still, to get an idea of what. So this is what I'm up to. And so if you take a look at and actually my Patreon is Ancient Magic, so it's much easier because it's Ancient Magic, patreon.com/ancient magic, and you will be able to see everything I'm up to.
Perfect.
Thank you for giving me the chance to mention that here.
Oh no, of course, and I just signed up to the Patreon, and it's really wonderful. I've really enjoyed your work so far, and it's very important. There is nothing more exciting, I think, than finding somebody who is excited about this kind of stuff. And I've from the very first moment that I was able to see some of your work, Dr. Dzwiza, it's just I love that you love this kind of stuff, because I think it's important, and I think it's really, really special. So I will have links up in the show notes for this episode. Please find Dr. Dzwiza's work. It is fantastic. I will have links to all of the recommendations that Dr. Dzwiza made on this episode, as well as all of the places to find Dr. Dzwiza's work on the internet and on the social media. Please, please, please seek out Kirsten's work. I think she is doing something really fantastic, and I would greatly appreciate having you support their work as well. This is very cool stuff, and I truly think that Dr. Dzwiza's work is of the highest order and is very important and worthy of support. So all of those things, and as well as some show notes, not a ton of show notes for this one, but there'll be some very interesting stuff, will be available at whatmagicisthis.com. Please head there for all of the show notes, as well as all of the links for Dr. Kirsten's work. Please go to whatmagicisthis.com. I'll say it one more time. Anyhow, do you think that's I'm doing something kind of cool here with the podcast, and you'd like to show your support in some way, shape, or form? There's 3 ways of doing that. And if you've never heard the show before, this is going to be new to you, then perfect. If this is not new to you and you've listened to my show, hang in there, because you never know. I might say something funny. But I'm just here to remind you 3 ways of supporting what I do here at What Magic Is This, because I think I'm doing something pretty cool too, Anyways, the first way of supporting me is through Patreon. That's the best way of supporting me. That's patreon.com/whatmagicisthis. There you can find, my goodness, all kinds of exclusive offerings. Another word that I use for content, but it's content, but they're offerings because I offer them to you so that you can support me. And so there's episodes on entities, there's episodes on books that I think are pretty cool and that you should read. There's episodes on how I like to do magic myself and what I'm currently going through magically in my magical world. I have videos on how to make incense and set up altars, how to use pendulums. I do episodes on creating your own Solomonic magical circle, things of that variety. Anyhow, my Patreon is literally $7 American a month. That's it. I'm not raising my prices. People would be like, Doug, raise your prices. I'm not doing it. I want people to come and support me on Patreon. It's like a whole different show. And truly, I think that my best work is on my Patreon account. I'm not just saying that because I want you to sign up. I work as hard, if not harder, on the stuff that I do on the Patreon as this podcast episode you're listening to now, as wonderful as they are. They're just different. They're just different. The Patreon stuff is more me involved, but also very detailed. Lots of great show notes and stuff there on those episodes as well. Anyways, I would love to see your support. $7 a month, that's nothing. That's, I don't know, that's a house plant. $7 a month, that's a couple of bags of chips or crisps if you're living across the water there, across the Atlantic Ocean over in England and Ireland and Scotland. And I don't know what they call potato chips in France or Spain. Do they even have them? I don't know. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Anyhow, $7 a month, $7 American a month. That's like $10 Canadian. Anyhow, I have no idea how many euros that is. It's just keeps me alive. This is my job. This is what I do. I wake up and I work on my podcast. I do everything. My life. The podcast is my job. I love it. I enjoy it, but I cannot do it without your support. I'd really appreciate it. So, if you can see your way to supporting me on Patreon, I'd greatly appreciate that. $7 a month. That is patreon.com/whatmagicisthis. Gives you access to a wonderful Discord community. Everybody's so great there. It's a place to ask questions, get different perspectives. It's so cool. And trust me, $7 a month is almost nothing compared to what you will get if you join my Patreon. All right, then I'll leave it there. The other way of supporting my show is PayPal. So you don't like doing the whole give some money to Doug every month kind of thing. You can support me through PayPal. Just send me $5, $10, $20, $100, $200,000. I'll take it. I'll take any amount you can give me. And it goes straight back into making this podcast the way that it is, pays for all of my hosting, both on the website as well as the podcast. It pays for new equipment, pays for my editing plugins. I've got a lot of expenses, and any and all money given and donated through the PayPal goes right back into making this podcast the way that it is. That normally just all comes out of my pocket each and every month. But every once in a while, a couple of people will be nice and they'll donate through PayPal, and it just helps me out, helps pay for the hamster that runs the What Magic Is This wheel, keeps them fit and hydrated. Anyhow, I like using that hamster on the wheel metaphor as far as what magic is this. I don't know why. It's a fun one. Anyhow, Patreon's another great way of, PayPal. Patreon is the best way of supporting me, but PayPal's another way of supporting me. Both are great. Another way to show your support is wearing your support or having some stickers or stuff like that, any kind of merchandise. I don't get a lot of money from it, and it's been pretty slow as of late, but if you want to grab yourself a t-shirt or anything like that, head to whatmagicisthis.com, click on the menu, go to the merchandise button there in the menu. T-shirts, hoodies, stickers, mugs. They used to have notebooks. I don't think they do anymore, unfortunately, which is too bad because the notebooks were the best. I use my notebook every day. Anyhow, if you want to just have something with one of the logos I've created or some of the logos that people have created for me, that would be awesome. I see about $1 or so from anything that you buy, so not a lot of money, but I always love seeing people wearing my logo. It's so bizarre and cool to me. I love it. So that is another way of showing your support, is by wearing or showing off the What Magic logo is to strangers or people around you. And trust me, people love it when you have a question on your t-shirt. It's like, what magic is this? People will come up to you and they'll be like, what magic is this? And you'll be like, hey, it's a podcast. Listen, it's a good one. You have no idea. Unless you wear the t-shirt, you have no idea how many people will ask you, what magic is this? And a lot of times they'll give you like the finger guns. They'll be like, hey, what magic is this? And you'll do the finger guns back. Hey, cool. I don't know what you say. Groovy. It's boss. It's, I don't know. What lingo are people saying these days? It's yeet. I am really failing here. This has not been my finest moment here trying to be cool. Anyways, people will be like, hey, what magic is this? And you'll be like, hey, check it out. It's a podcast. Anyhow, well, this merchandise section is almost as long, if not longer, than the Patreon one. Anyhow, best way of supporting me, though, is the Patreon. I'd appreciate it. It's $7 a month. It feeds me, keeps me happy, and it keeps me doing the thing that I love, which is making these podcast episodes. Anyhow, everything can be available at whatmagicisthis.com, including finding all of Kirsten's work. Please. Kirsten is one of the great scholars that we have in the magic realm today. Please support them. Please find their work. Get involved. But everything can be found at whatmagicisthis.com. We'll see you over there. Dr. Dzwiza, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that if some point in the not too distant future, I was going to ask you to come back on the podcast, you'd be willing to do so. We can talk about more stuff. Again, I had this list of like 8 things. I was like, oh, but this one we focused on magical artifacts, and I'm so glad we did, but there's plenty we can talk about. My goodness.
Thank you for having me. This was so much, really, it was so much fun and it's so much pleasure to talk about it. And I'm so happy to hear that you like the idea of imagination, because I was like, oh, do I say it or do I not say it? Because people can think, oh, that's crazy. But this is awesome. I would absolutely love to come back, and I enjoyed here sharing my thoughts and research very much. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Dzwiza. And yes, imagination is, I truly believe, one of the most fantastic and most underutilized aspects of humanity these days. And while we're constantly being told that it's not real, it is, and it's got more power than those that say it doesn't exist do, and it does. So with that sentiment, thank you so much again, Dr. Dzwiza. Thank you so much, all of the listeners here. Come on back to What Magic Is This? We're going to talk about more of this wonderfully ancient, antiquated, beautiful, eclectic thing that we like to call magic and the occult. Until next time, everybody, I want each and every one of you to stay healthy, to stay hopeful, and to stay luminous. We will talk to each and every one of you very, very soon. Goodbye, everybody. Ta-ta. Goodbye.